Okay, so this is live, but I just need to. Where's the one to put the link in? Share. So if you go to the, I'll put this on my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
If you can just put it everywhere else. Okay, can you do that right now? So we're live with that.
Oh, the master was awesome. Like we had so much fun. Because it was Alan and Patrick and then Jay and Fabio. Yeah, just before he left. Yeah, yeah. Like yeah, and this was I don't think you know Owen, the one that they were messaging like in January that was going to China. On the ladies' remember now, like we were like 90.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome. Welcome. Thank you very much for taking the trouble to come out. I hope you're going to enjoy and find this productive, maybe even life-changing and shattering. Okay. A little bit about getting to know a bit about me and a bit about you so that we get a good event out of it. First of all, about me. I organize a lot of meetups. I run a training and consultancy company called Easy Peasy. Some of you have some brochures. Feel free to share them. But this is not really a commercial pitch. So I coach people. I run training courses on innovation, design for persuasion, willpower. Some of you have been to my course on Organize for Success, which takes all these behavior science tricks. So one of the areas that was constantly coming up was procrastination. So how many of you have occasionally suffered from it? Well, today the idea is to introduce you to it and also to talk about the system. So first thing I need to explain to you before I hand over to Jason, who's going to talk and explain about him, is there are many reasons for people procrastinating. Some sometimes you can procrastinate if you're depressed. Has anybody ever been depressed? Right? Sometimes you can do it out of burnout. Any of you suffer from burnout? Okay. Sometimes you can procrastinate. So I'm not a therapist trying to solve your depression problems. All right? I'm not here to try and solve all the burnout issues. Okay? What we try to do, what you'll notice about good companies is they put systems in place so that you can get on with your job. Okay? How many of you work in sales? Okay, what system do you use? Salesforce?
Yeah.
CRM? So what does it do? It sends you the reminders. It takes the cognitive load off. So a lot of the work that I work with people is to teach them about those systems and about some of the behavior science things. But the other purpose that we do with the meetup group is also to help other fellow coaches. So it's not about this being my business, this is about it being your event and trying to keep it. So first of all, how many of you here are life coaches or in the coaching business? Okay, so feel free to use the material. I'm not going to sit down because coaching is very much about personal chemistry, isn't it? Right? So you may use the same spices but in a different order for a different palate. Is that a fair way to explain it? And you know, we run events. Some of you have been to our events on nutrition. So how many of you come through our meetup, everything coaching? All right. How many of you come through Eventbrite? How many have come from the behavior science meetup? How many from the promotions on LinkedIn? Okay. Obviously none of you use LinkedIn. No, I'm teasing. All right. So, like I said, what we want to do is to help. You know, my view is that whether as an individual or as a team, you want to create value for the other person. Okay. So I hope, and you will also understand. One other thing that I will do when I'm going to talk about the second part of the event, which is all about accountability circles, and you'll see how it connects. So, just as a little reminder. After we finish this thing, those that then are interested in joining our WhatsApp group, this is the scan for the code for the WhatsApp for the accountability circles. All right, and I'll talk about that later. So if you could just pass it around, and when we come around to doing it, then you can just scan it, okay? Oh, that's fine. Ryan, just pass this out. Okay, now my apologies to the poor people who got to stand. You know, now if we were a real team, what we could do is rotate the chairs, but it would be too much like musical chairs. So my bad that we haven't got enough chairs for you. So let me share a little bit about Jason. So Jason came to our talk on habits. How many of you came to the talk on habits? How many of you been to any of our events before, by the way? Okay. So anyone want to tell what happens at the events? Did you enjoy them? Yeah. Obviously you're here again, so. Okay, so not all the events have me talking. So far we've probably given talks to about 6,000 people. So, you know, I'd like to think that I've added value to people because some of them even come again. All right, so Jason is a coaching psychologist who trained in Trinity and in UCC. So he has his own practice. You should have put your website here, Jason. It's Jason Moran, Jason spelled with a Y, .com, and basically helps professionals and entrepreneurs with their personal development and productivity. All right? So now, how many of you come from a sales background? How many of you from IT? How many of you from personnel? It's surprising, nobody from personnel. Huh? They've obviously got it just right. Okay. So tell me a little bit about what other professions. What would you like to get out of this event? Absolutely nothing. Come on, throw something and get it going.
To improve.
All right. Okay, fantastic. So that's going to be our objective. Everybody happy with that? All right. Okay, Jason, over to you.
Hi, thanks very much for the very nice introduction, Manoj. Good evening, everybody. So, as Manoj said, my name is Jason Warren, and I'm a coaching psychologist. So I first got into psychology in around my mid-20s, and I suppose my main question was, why do people do what they do? I suppose there was a lot of people in my life who were doing things that were maybe annoying me a little bit or whatever, but I couldn't necessarily understand why people were doing what they were doing. So I was privileged enough to get into training college to study psychology to try and answer that question. And about 3 years into the 4-year degree, my question started to change a little bit. So I suppose I was concerned with my own grades and my own performance, and also looking around at a lot of very smart kids who weren't maybe getting the grades that they liked. And so the question started to turn into, you know, why don't people do the things that they should do in terms of relation to performance? So again, I was privileged enough to get into University College Cork, and there I done a master's in coaching psychology. So, how could I put this? So I suppose, you know those things that you know you should do? Those important things? What I do is I help people do those things. And I do that by helping people to understand themselves a little bit better. So I might do stuff like personality testing, values assessment, basically helping people figure out who they are. The second way I can help people do the things that they know they should do is by helping put a bit more clarity around those things. So i.e. their goals. So are their goals in line with who they are, with their values, what they think is important, with their personality as well? The third way I help people do the things that they should do is by looking at the things that get in the way. And so the topic tonight's talk, procrastination, is one of those things. So hopefully tonight I'll help you maybe get started on some of those things. Maybe those things have been hanging over you a long time. Maybe they're those long, boring, mundane, but critically important tasks that you have to do. The third thing I'm going to try to do is perhaps show you a little bit how we can use the power of habit to overcome and reduce and minimize procrastination. So, how am I going to do that? Wrong screen, I've just realized. So first of all, I'm going to explain what procrastination is, and a little bit about why I think it's so important. The second thing I want to look at was why we procrastinate. And thirdly, I am going to bring you through a couple of strategies that, you know, the science say works and that I use with clients all the time and seem to get me results. So, I suppose first off, there's a very famous book written in the 1970s called The Inner Game of Tennis. I don't know, has anyone heard of it? It's by a guy called Tim Galway, and it's basically about overcoming the mental blocks in terms of how people play tennis. But he's got a very good formula for performance. So in it, Tim says performance is equal to potential minus interference. Very simple formula in one way. I suppose in my practice and when I'm working with people, there's lots of different types of interference. So things like confidence comes up a lot. Pretty much so linked is assertiveness. Stress is a big one. A lot of people can't seem to think straight, or they become a little bit overbecome, especially in the entrepreneurial space, I find. Structure or lack of organisation is another form of interference that gets in the way, and Manoj has obviously done quite a lot of work on that. And finally, procrastination. So, what exactly is procrastination? Well, by definition, it's simply putting off until later what our better judgment tells us we should do now. I suppose in its essence, it's avoiding immediate discomfort. To do other things that can seem suddenly more important or suddenly more enjoyable. So it's a little bit different than laziness in that respect. So in terms of being lazy, we tend to want to do nothing, or we want to do less of the thing that we should do. Whereas with procrastination, we often tend to do other tasks, i.e. the cleaning, Netflix or YouTube are my personal favourite.
And video games.
We tend to procrastinate in 3 major areas. The first is self-development, so in terms of our learning and growth. So think of that guitar that's sitting at home gathering dust despite the fact you only ever learned to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. The second area is self-maintenance. So health behaviours is another very common one that we procrastinate on. Also, our mental health as well, stress and not taking care of that. And the third area where we tend to procrastinate is in terms of tasks that are given to us from other people. So I think a good example of that is a task your boss might give you that you don't think is worthwhile, or something you shouldn't have to do, so you delay as long as you possibly can before you do it. In terms of how we actually go about procrastinating, I think this video gives some very nice little examples. I hope the sound works now.
This morning I got up and got ready quickly because I had to get a lot of stuff done. I sat down at my desk to start getting my stuff done, and I spilled my coffee, so I got a sponge to clean it up, and I figured I'd take an extra minute to clean the whole desk because a clean desk would help me get my stuff done. When I was finished, I realized I hadn't eaten anything and I didn't want to be hungry while I got my stuff done, so I went into the kitchen and I was out of cereal. When I got to the grocery store, I remembered a bunch of other crap I needed to get, and I figured I was already there, so I did my shopping for the week so I didn't have to worry about it while I got my stuff done. When I got home, I didn't feel like cereal anymore, and so I made an omelet and I did the dishes so I wouldn't have to do them after I got my stuff done, and then I went out to get some oil from the hardware store because my desk chair was kind of squeaky and I didn't want to be distracted by a squeaky chair while I got my stuff done. When I got back, it was getting kind of late, and I knew I wouldn't be able to get my stuff done today, so I started watching the Twilight Zone marathon on TV. I just have to make sure I get to bed early because I want to be well rested tomorrow so I can get my stuff done.
So, who here is at a day like this?
That is very entertaining. So true.
So in terms of how we procrastinate, does anyone have any favourite strategies? Anything they particularly like to avoid doing the things they do? Has anyone got a particular thing that they like to do?
That's in there.
No one
It's
procrastinates?
finding the silly thing you don't really need to do because it's a bit nicer to do than the thing you have to do. And
Exactly
that's it.
Yeah. So in terms of how we go about that, we might leave things until the last minute. People's commute to work, I find, is a good one with that they will delay it until right at the very last moment, finding suddenly something will become very interesting on their phone, etc. And it's quite a lot of the time why people are slightly late over it. We overthink, so we can't decide whether to do A or B, so neither A or B gets done. We have the thought, I'll do it tomorrow. It's a bit of a cliche, but tomorrow never comes. Another strategy is having that thought, I'll do it when the stars align, when everything is perfect. The issue with that is that it's very rarely things end up being perfect. And as a result, we don't start doing those things at all. When unimportant tasks suddenly become important, I know when I was doing my master's thesis, my apartment was never as clean. We find excuses, we find reasons. Again, personally, I find this with the gym and workout routines. I mean, even yesterday, I was like, oh, I've got that presentation tomorrow. I don't want to be achy and tired. Maybe I'll skip the gym. Creating the illusion of starting is my personal specialty. I will tidy my desk. I will have absolutely everything perfect. Feng shui out the door. Feng shui. And then that'll take half an hour, and then I'll decide I need a little bit of a break. So don't really start at all. Labeling yourself as slow, lazy, or stupid, it's not so much that, it's just you just need to actually just start. It's fine, you can do it most of the time. I'm waiting to feel motivated, and this is a very common one I find with clients, that they'll come to me and they'll go, I just don't feel like doing it. Well, I suppose that feeling of being motivated is much more common just after you start than just before. And sometimes you just need to get going rather than wait for that feeling. So, why do I think procrastination is so important? Well, obviously enough, you're going to be less productive. The longer it takes you to start those tasks you should do, the less of them you're going to get done. A little bit less, obviously, is the reduction in pleasure in those things that I call the tools of procrastination. So, these are the tasks that we use to procrastinate, and it's often things that we would normally find enjoyable. And I suppose to explain this, imagine watching an episode of your favourite Netflix show, or maybe the new Game of Thrones that's coming up. So imagine watching that as a reward for a very unpleasant task that you've had to do. Anyone think of a really unpleasant task you might do before you watch a favourite episode of someone gave me an example the other day of cleaning the horrific toilet in their apartment. So imagine how you'd feel. You'd feel quite satisfied and pleased with yourself. The horrible job was done, and you're rewarding yourself. So imagine how you'd feel watching the exact same episode, except you're doing it to avoid doing something you know you need to do, maybe something that's really a bit unpleasant and you're dreading. So it kind of takes away a little bit of the joy in those situations too. The third reason is, well, life is short, and we've got a limited amount of time. So the longer it takes us to start those tasks that we should do, it leaves less time for our leisure time and doing the things that we love. So, as to why we procrastinate, this is a video. I keep pointing this thing at the screen. I'm sorry, my inexperience is showing. So, as to why we procrastinate, this is a video by a lady called Mel Robbins. I think she's got some useful stuff in it. I'll just play it, and Mel will explain her theory on it, I suppose, better than I ever will.
Okay, how many procrastinators are in the room? Raise your hand. And everybody else is just procrastinating on raising their hand. I'm about to change your life because this piece of research changed mine. Procrastination has nothing to do with work. The people that write to us the most that struggle with procrastinating, PhD students, engineers, entrepreneurs, people that have a lot on their plate, that have a lot of things that they need to juggle, and that are analytical and thinkers by nature. Procrastination is a form of stress relief. What are you stressed about? Bingo, and it makes you upset, doesn't it? Yeah. How many of you can relate to that? She said that what's stressing her out is she wants to retire. She hasn't saved up enough money. What's really stressing you out is finances and money and the fear that you have. What happens when you struggle with procrastinating, and thank you for being so honest, it stresses you out. Maybe you feel the same way, and we felt that way. I know exactly what you're talking about. You carry around this dark cloud because you don't think you're going to make it. You're stressed about money all the time. Or maybe your mom's health is declining and it really stresses you out. Or maybe your best friends are going through a divorce, or you're going through a divorce, and that really stresses you out. And so you walk around with this big ass thing on your shoulders all the time. And then you walk into work and you sit down and you've got a list of phone calls to make, which requires your prefrontal cortex. And your prefrontal cortex looks at the list and is like, oh my God, you want me to make 15 phone calls? I've been worried about the money all day. Can we just look at cat videos? I need a break. And next thing you know, 2 hours is gone. You've been online shopping, you've been looking at cat videos. And then of course you look at the 15 phone calls, you're like, I didn't make them, I didn't make them, I didn't make them. The research on procrastination is undeniable, it's black and white. Number one, all of you that procrastinate, procrastination is not the issue, it's stress. You're procrastinating to give yourself a little break at work. It's sort of like taking a smoking break almost, you know? You're just taking a break. So number one, because you're all stressed out and procrastinators are very hard on yourselves, this is gonna sound super stupid, but you gotta forgive yourself. You have got to actually have a talk with yourself where when you feel yourself starting to procrastinate, you go, look, I really screwed up. I know I'm in a mess financially. I forgive myself. I'm just gonna do the best that I can. So you have to address the thing that's underneath it. So that self-awareness of knowing, oh my God, here's that stress again about finances screwing me over and preventing me from doing the small things that will actually fix my finances. Second thing that you're gonna do, procrastination's a habit, right? You get triggered by stress, the habit is to procrastinate. So when you get triggered by stress, your new habit is, oh, there's my stress again. I'm gonna actually tell myself, okay, you've done the best you can, it's okay, we're gonna do a little bit today. You're gonna create what we call starting ritual. A starting ritual is something that pushes you to start. The best one on the planet, the 5-second rule. So you've said, okay, there's my stress again, I forgive myself, now we're gonna 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I want you to only work for 5 minutes. That's it, 5 minutes. Make phone calls for 5 minutes. Here's what we know, based on the research. 80% of you will keep going. The trick is starting. You see, I want to break the connection between the trigger, which is stress, and the response, which is procrastination. And whenever you feel stressed, which is normal, you have a choice. Here's that gap. In 5 seconds flat, the habit of procrastinating and beating yourself up will take over. Or you can close the gap, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you can make a different choice. I'm just gonna get started. I'm just gonna be okay with where I'm at, and I'm just gonna get started. Got it? Good. Welcome.
So, really like that video by Mel. She makes a couple of kind of points that I would be very much in line with. The first, I suppose, is that procrastination is an emotional problem. So I suppose she talks about stress. I'm going to go into a little bit more in depth about that emotional issue and why it's happening. The second thing I think that I like that she covers as well is the whole trigger response idea with it, that we've got something in the environment and we have an automatic response. So, why do people procrastinate? Well, procrastination is a result of how we feel. And we feel the way we do because of how we think. So our thoughts and beliefs lead us to feel a certain way, which causes us to behave a certain way, i.e. procrastinate.
By the way, just a minor thing, but how many of you have problems making a decision? All right, so let me give you an example. Have any of you ever been in a relationship and you didn't want to tell the person it's over? Hands up. How many of you have ghosted a phone call? Because avoidance is a way of trying to deal with the pain. It's only temporary. And then what you'll do is you'll do something else. So it's not just about physical things. So if there is some emotional pain attached to dealing with the problem, whether it is bad debt, whether it is an awkward conversation, whether it is fear of that subject, the mind will want to shut off with that. Anyway, so don't just think that procrastination is about not doing things. You know, as Jason said, and very often what we do is, and the consequence of that is that stack piles up till you get burnout. You know, you don't want to go to work or school with a little child because it stresses it out. That's a form of procrastination. Does that make sense? Right? So when you see yourself not doing something, be it making a decision, think of it in that light about what is the pain, right? Because all those triggers will kick off. Is that making sense? Yeah. All right. So I hope that amplified it.
Completely. Where was I? So, procrastination is caused by how we feel and what causes these feelings. So, what causes these feelings is two types of internal conflict. So the first type of internal conflict is called ego disturbance. And all ego disturbance is when we chastise ourselves or beat ourselves up for not living up to our own expectations. And this causes us to feel a slight anxiety. The second type of internal conflict that leads us to procrastinate is called low frustration tolerance. And all this is we perceive that we're going to be unable to cope with the boredom or frustration that some of these tasks inherently involve, or we think that they're going to involve. So we feel anxious, we feel bored, or we feel frustrated. So this breaks down into like 6 types of procrastinators and underlying beliefs that cause these feelings. So the first 3 are motivated by anxiety. So the perfectionist has got the underlying belief, if I don't do the task extremely well, then I'm a failure. And this causes them to feel anxious about the task, and so they avoid doing it. The second type is the worrier, and they're full of self-doubt. They don't believe that they're going to be able to do the task. So a typical worrier belief that underlies their anxiety is, if I try, then I won't be able to do it. The third type of procrastinator that's motivated by anxiety is called the overdoer. And what the overdoer does is they take on way too many things, too many tasks. They fail to prioritize them, and then the important ones don't get done. So, do you mind if I ask, actually, if people think about something that they're maybe procrastinating about now, Do you think that you're maybe motivated a little bit by anxiety? There's a little bit of anxiety around it? Or do you think maybe it's more
Wait a
boredom?
minute. Hands up.
I'm sorry. It's a little bit of anxiety around it.
What is the first way to solve a problem? Right. So we're going to be honest with each other and ourselves today, right? Okay, next question.
Okay. And so, who thinks that the reason they're procrastinating about whatever task it is it boredom? You go hands up again. So they feel like the task is maybe too long and mundane. I'm just curious then, in terms of if people are procrastinating about a task, who's kind of motivated by a little bit by frustration, or they feel they shouldn't have to do the task, that it's a little bit stupid or a little bit not worthwhile? We go hands again. Right. Okay. So some people are with both. Okay. Just curious. So, in terms of procrastinators that are motivated by boredom or frustration, there's also three types. So the first is the crisis maker, and they like to leave things until the last minute. And they leave things until the last minute because they find the tasks are going to be a little bit boring, and they find, at least that little bit of stress at the end makes it, gives them a little bit of an adrenaline hit, and so they do it there. So the typical kind of underlying belief behind a crisis maker procrastinator is, I perform better when I'm under pressure.
So how many people leave things to the last minute?
My dad.
Can I just say that I do this for a different reason. I actually think that the longer I sit with an idea, even on an unconscious level, the more sort of convergence that goes on with different things going on around me, so that when I finally come to do something, I have, the most information, experience available to me at that time.
But that's not procrastination. That is a strategy.
But
Sometimes,
it does carry a little bit of that.
yeah,
process,
because where that happens the most is when you feel you don't have enough information to make a decision, right? Because before you go forward, there are certain decisions, like the decision to do something is a decision.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things you'll say, so I need to do more research, or I need to go and gather, and this is where JFK...
I don't call it procrastination. It was just, does anyone do this? And
No, but-
yeah.
Well, I suppose, my thoughts on it are, if you go back to the definition of procrastination, and it's kind of like, what our better judgment tells us we should be doing now rather than later. And so, there is often what our judgment is on that. Are we ready to go? Are we ready to start that business? Are we ready to get up and speak in front of 60 people or whatever, And it's whether are you not doing it because the situation isn't right, or are you not doing it because you're slightly anxious or afraid or bored or frustrated, I suppose as I get a little bit more into the mechanics of how to become more aware of it, it'll kind of maybe give you a better idea whether you're just procrastinating or whether you're waiting for the right moment. But it's a very good point, yeah.
Sometimes I can connect that with how you work, because I know I do that sometimes, and I'm gathering all my pieces and it'll all come together at the end, but I make others nervous in the process. But I do.
Yeah. But I'm someone who's always had to be very bloody organised, and even remember doing group work with people, and they're a bit more laissez-faire, and it's fine, it'll all come together at the end, and I'd be like chewing my fingernails off, going, we're never going to get together, and I suppose there is a bit of a balance. But I suppose the question that I would often ask people who are the crisis maker, I'm like, so if you think that you perform better if you leave everything to the last minute, what about planning out everything and doing it, to a bit of structure and a bit of time? Do you actually perform better or do you not? And most people I've spoken to about it, generally, if they give themselves enough time, they perform better. It's not necessarily always the case, as in, but I suppose that's the, what's the underlying emotion behind it? Is it boredom? It's like, you're a bit laissez-faire, or maybe you think the task isn't that important, so you're leaving it till the last minute.
I think just reflecting on this as well, it's about how comfortable you are with uncertainty as well as you move through,
It all comes down to personality to an extent,
Yeah, because if you're a football team and you're trying to win the European Championship in the last 3 minutes and you need 2 goals, maybe you should have thought of scoring them much earlier back. Don't leave it to the last 2 minutes. That gave me some heart attacks that night.
Everyone talks about how amazing that Man United comeback was, but it's like, they did procrastinate about that.
Well, they did procrastinate about getting in the penalty box. So let's just say that, take on what you're all saying. It's really important because sometimes if you did have to put something together like a dinner or whatever it might be, you don't have to spend all day peeling the spuds and putting them in the water. And you can, if you think, I can squeeze this out of 20 minutes. And it's not, and I can do that and I perform better and I squeeze the time just to fit the task and that's it out of the way. Even though I left it till before I served it, that's okay because it's fresh then.
There's one issue with that, if something unexpected happens.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly.
And that
Yeah.
can happen.
Then
I
your guests
suppose-
have to wait.
I think people can trick themselves into thinking sometimes, you know, especially if a task bores them a bit, they just don't want to spend, they want to spend as little time as possible on it, you know. So anyway, in terms of those motivated, yeah, I know, sorry, I've not very clicker experience. So the fifth kind of type of procrastinator is the dreamer, and the dreamer again is motivated by boredom and frustration. So the dreamer thinks everything should fall in lap, that they shouldn't have to work hard to fulfill their dreams. That's their kind of major underlying belief. And the final type of procrastinator is the defier. A good example of the defier is when your boss gives you something that you think isn't worthwhile, or you don't want to do, or a task you find boring, or maybe your spouse. It always reminds me of kind of sulky teenager, and they're going to have the thought, I shouldn't have to do this is so stupid. But the reality of it is, it's part of their job probably, or you know, something you might have to do because they're in a relationship. And the reality is, you should have to do it, and that kind of, you know, that thought I shouldn't have to do it is leading you to procrastinate and eventually not get that thing done and perhaps get in trouble or make it more stressful than it needs to be. So, if we go back to kind of talk a little bit about the cognitive behavioural model. So this is what I usually use in terms of analysing and kind of helping people with procrastination. So, in simple terms, in the cognitive behavioural model, between any situation or stimulus, we
The word
have...
there, by the way, for the people in the back is situation.
Oh, you can't see, sorry. Excuse my red on blue wasn't the best choice. So around any given situation, we've got three responses. We have beliefs or thoughts, i.e. we think. We have emotions, i.e. we feel. And we have behaviours, we act. So if you think of the example of my alarm clock going off in the morning, I feel slightly annoyed. I have the thought 10 more minutes or I don't want to get up. And I hit snooze and go back to sleep. Relatively simple.
Yeah.
So in the cognitive behavioural model, all of these things affect each other. So how we think affects how we feel and how we behave. How we feel affects how we behave and how we think. And how we behave affects how we feel and how we think as well. But a very important one of those relationships is that our beliefs and thoughts affect both our emotions and our behaviours. So if you think back to what Mel was saying earlier in that video, that whole idea of stimulus response, there's a trigger and we react. You know, in terms of the alarm clock, the way she's thinking of it is, we have the alarm clock, then we get annoyed and we hit snooze. It's kind of based on a behavioural model. And what the cognitive behavioural model suggests is that we have that stimulus, we have that alarm clock, we think about what's happening, even though it's very, very quick often, and then we have our emotional and our behavioural responses. So I'm kind of going to use that in terms of some of the strategies a little bit later.
If I can just amplify one other thing. Do you know that your mind knows before you know? So how long before you have a thought has that decision been made?
6 seconds.
No, it's actually a quarter of a second. This is also how you do a test for biases. You know, when they give you a thing. So it's very important that you know, when we talk about mindful thinking, cognitive thinking, it's starting to become aware of these triggers and so on.
And exactly that's it. It's I suppose in terms of my strategies later, becoming aware is a very key point. So, just in terms of summing up, in terms of why people procrastinate, we procrastinate because of how we think, and this leads us to feel a certain way, and this leads us to behave in a certain way. So you might have the thought, if I try then I'll fail. You know, if you think the worrier, if you go back to those types. that makes them feel anxious, and so they avoid the task. Or
So how many people here are stuck with a situation that they don't get started because of fear of failure? All right.
or another example, you know, you have the thought or belief, "Oh, I shouldn't have to do this," whether it's that horrible job or, you know, something that's difficult or a bit mundane, or sometimes the early groundwork work on a project. And that makes you feel bored or frustrated, and what do? You avoid the task. So that's the basic cognitive behavioral model explaining why we procrastinate.
Why do I put off my tax return every year?
Because there's 5 reasons. You know what the 5 are? Well, if you think about it, why do credit cards succeed? Because they defer the pain of making a payment. Second issue is that the concept of dealing with the tax man getting it wrong creates a lot of anxiety. You know what I mean? Right, so you don't want to deal with it. Third, for a lot of people, it is an unpleasant task. You may not like doing numbers, right? So those 3 things, and anything else that comes after that can be things like the other factors, like I don't have enough time, and that amplifies the anxiety to get it done because it's a deadline, and so on, right? And that's why as businesses get bigger, what they do is they do it as they go along, you know, your VAT returns, your expenses, and so on. But usually what you need is somebody else to help you get it done, which is what we'll cover with accountability circles. So, you know, sometimes we are not aware of why we do things. We make a reason which isn't the real reason, you know. So there's a whole bunch of things like that, and you know, this is what he'll go through. Carry on.
Well, if you'd like later, we can maybe see if we can use you as an example, if that's okay. No, okay. Well,
No, I
does
don't.
yeah. Well, we'll see, because I'm going to bring people through method, and maybe we could do a little bit of light. I don't know how, whether it'll work with loads of people around, but we could try it for the crack if you'd like. And in answer to your question, thanks very much. Yeah. In answer to your question, I would say you're not doing your tax returns because you feel a little bit anxious about them. Do you feel a little bit anxious, or do you find it a boring task?
I think it's boring, but I don't think I feel anxious, but I do everything every year. I start gathering things, I do a spreadsheet, I do all this thing, and I say, I'm doing it early.
So
And
you.
my sister said, just accept you're doing it, and it starts off.
So if you're feeling a little bored, what I would say is you're not doing the task because you feel a little bored, and you feel a little bored because of how you're thinking about it.
And
What-
then
what
you
your
stress
thoughts are
all
around
year
it.
because you're not doing it.
And then, you know, anxiety breeds anxiety and other negative emotions as well. But anyway, where was it? So, all that said, how do we go about reducing or minimizing the amount that we procrastinate? So this is a video by a guy called Dan Early. I really find it difficult to pronounce his second name for some reason. And Dan is a very eminent behavioral economist. Very interesting guy. I seen him speak in Trinity last year, and this is just his take on procrastination, his experiences with it, and the strategy that he used to overcome it.
So procrastination is basically a simple term for a deep problem with human nature. And the problem has to do with time. We live in the here and now, but what's good for us is often long in the future. And we have plans. In the future we will save money, and we would eat healthily, and we would exercise, and we would do this and we would do that, and we will do all that. Today I just don't feel like it. Today the chocolate cake is tempting, and the gym is far away, and it's a little too humid outside, and I really saw a new bike and I don't feel like saving. So procrastination is about the problem that we're just not designed to think about the long term. Right? Why would nature even get us to think about what will happen 30 or 50 or 60 years from now? So we think about now, and the now is much more powerful, and the future doesn't work. A personal story, I was in hospital for many years, and one of the things that happened was I got hepatitis C from an infected blood that they gave me as a blood donation. And in the beginning, they didn't know it was hepatitis C. They just said hepatitis, and it would flare up from time to time and make my recovery much, much slower. And about 6 years later, they identified the virus for hepatitis C, and I knew what I had. And then there was a treatment called interferon. And interferon is a medication that was developed for hairy cell leukemia. It's an unpleasant medication. After each injection, I would feel vomiting and sick and fever and so on. And I had to take these injections 3 times a week for a year and a half. So now think about this problem. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I had to go home, measure in the syringe the injection, plug it into my thigh, and inject myself, knowing that in an hour I will start vomiting and having fever and so on. It's very tough to do, right? But that's really the basic human problem. If there's something that is good for us in the future, I really don't want to die from liver cirrhosis, but the steps that we can take now are incredibly painful to fix that. So we often don't do that. This, by the way, brings us to the second issue about what do we do about it? How can we overcome it? So when I finished this year and a half of treatment, the doctors told me that I was the only patient that they ever had that took their medications regularly. And you can wonder, do I have more self-control than other people? But I don't. I eat the same junk food and I do the same mistakes and I procrastinate just the same way. But I created a trick for myself. And the trick is that I love movies. If I had time, I would watch lots of movies. So I said I'm not watching movies any other time but Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on those mornings, I would go to the video store, I would rent 2 or 3 movies that I like. I would have them in my backpack for the whole day, anticipating watching them. And when I would get home, I would inject myself, I would get a blanket for the shivering, I would get a bucket for the vomiting, and I would start watching the movie immediately. I didn't wait until I would get sick. I basically tried to create a connection between the injection and something I loved. And I think that's basically one of the tricks we can try and do to ourselves. We say, we are not designed to care about the future. We just can't change that. We just can't change the fact that we'll think every day, what I do now will translate to 30 years from now. So instead what we can do is we can create other benefits that will be more in the present, kind of import new benefits for the present.
I really like Dan. He is a very entertaining speaker anytime I've seen him. And I suppose what I get from that video is the importance of having numerous strategies. And the reason being, so I suppose Dan's strategy is to reward yourself whenever you do a task that you're likely to procrastinate on. So in his instance, he gets to watch one of his favourite movies when he injects himself with interferon, despite the fact he knows it's going to make him very, very ill. And I suppose the issue with that strategy is you can't use it in every procrastinating situation. So, for example, when I was doing my master's thesis, if I was to reward myself with maybe a little piece of cake or a candy every time I started work on it, there would be a lot more of me here today talking to you. So, different strategies, in my mind, work in different kind of areas. And I suppose Dan's background is behavioural economics, so that, again, reward, trigger reward is going to be very big in his mind. So, in terms of how I reckon to beat procrastination is I've got both psychological and practical strategies. And I think it's important to address the psychological issues first in terms of why you're procrastinating before you move on to the practical, because if you don't get at the underlying reasons, your procrastination is just going to keep popping up, even though the strategies do kind of work in the short term. So in terms of the first strategy, I'm kind of going to be like Dan and do a personal story as well. I stopped smoking a couple of months ago. I had to go about 2 months ago since I stopped. And before I quit, I procrastinated for quite a long time before I did. And so the method I'm about to explain to you now is the method that kind of got me to actually start that quit and stop, And how I did it is first of all, I kind of had a look at, started to do a bit of self-reflection in terms of why I was procrastinating. And the first thing that I came up with was that I was feeling a little bit anxious about it. And again, a little bit more self-reflection on why am I feeling anxious. I suppose the thought that kept coming into my head was, well, when I'm stressed, I want a cigarette. Dug a little deeper and kind of looked at, why that was important. and I come up with the thought, you know, if I can't have a cigarette when I'm stressed, I won't be able to cope. Again, I dug a little deeper, and I'll show you guys how to now. I suppose the underlying belief, or what was driving me, was the thought, if I try, then I'll fail. So in terms of strategy one, increasing the awareness of procrastination enabling beliefs, or getting at the real reasons, it wasn't that I got at the real reasons why I was procrastinating that I was able to do something about it. So strategy one involves maybe understanding a little bit about the cognitive behavioral model. And in the cognitive behavioral model, there's two types of thought. Well, there's a couple of types of thought, but there's two important ones for today. So the first are what are called automatic thoughts. And all an automatic thought is that inner voice going through your head at any given moment. Some people say that they can't really put their finger or hear that inner given voice. And what I tell them is the voice that's saying I can't put my finger on that inner given voice is that inner voice.
Yeah.
If you get me. But it can take a little bit of work to kind of get to it. Moments where you feel, you know, a negative emotion, or you're doing negative behavior. So this is what are called automatic negative thoughts. And sorry, all they are the thoughts that you have just before you feel an emotion that maybe is a little that you don't particularly want to feel, or you're doing a behavior that you don't want to do. So in my smoking example, the automatic thought, the thought that was coming through my head when I thought about quitting smoking was, I want a cigarette when I'm stressed. The second kind of thought in the cognitive behavioral model that I'm going to run through today are what are called underlying beliefs. And what an underlying belief is a rule or an attitude about how the world works. So, and they form the basis of automatic thoughts. So if we think of my smoking example, the underlying rule that was kind of driving or creating that thought, I want a cigarette when I'm stressed, the underlying belief was, if I'm stressed, then I won't be able to cope without a cigarette. So they often take the form of if-then statements. So it's like a rule. If X, then Y. Yeah? So how do we get at these underlying beliefs once we have our automatic thoughts? Well, all you do is you take the automatic thought, you write it down, and you ask yourself the question, why is that important? Different variations of that question as well, you know, what does the automatic thought mean to me? So in this example, when I ask myself, why is I want a cigarette when I'm stressed so important to me, I come up with the underlying belief, if I'm stressed, then I won't be able to cope without a cigarette. Now there is layers to these underlying beliefs. So you can have an underlying belief underneath your underlying belief. And how to get it then, all you do again is you take your underlying belief and you ask the same question, why is that important to me? So when I ask myself, you know, why is it so important that if I'm stressed then I won't be able to cope without a cigarette, I get into a further underlying belief, and that was basically, if I try, then I'll fail. So obviously when I was doing this, it wasn't quite as tidy as, you know, I'm getting all the if-then statements, but I suppose it's just to show you. But this was basically the method I used to stop myself procrastinating. So in terms of you guys, in terms of how to go about this, what you want to do is imagine the situation, visualize or put yourself in it, and then try put your finger on what you're feeling. So is it anxiety, is it boredom, is it frustration? Once you have that, then you have that point where you want to start having a look at, you know, what is the automatic negative thought that you're using to procrastinate? And once you have that, you can ask yourself, why is that important? And get at the underlying belief. What's the real reason that you're procrastinating? So if you go back to my smoking example, I was feeling a little bit anxious about quitting. And so I was able to kind of put my finger on, you know, the automatic negative thought was, I want a cigarette when I'm stressed. And the underlying belief was, if I try, well then I'm going to fail. And that's what was kind of fueling my procrastination. If you go back to the alarm clock example, what was happening was I was feeling a little bit frustrated or annoyed that I had to get up. My automatic negative thought was 10 more minutes or I don't want to get up, obviously enough. But underlying that, when I've done a little bit of digging, asking why was that important, I suppose I came to the conclusion that at that moment in time I was having the thought, you know, I shouldn't have to get up. So that's in terms of, that's how you might get at the real reasons why you're procrastinating. So sometimes becoming aware of why you're procrastinating can be enough to kind of help you get some movement on it and move forward, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes, you know, you can do this process, kind of get at the real reason, and still not, you know, feel motivated to start whatever it is you're supposed to start. So this is why strategy 2 is about challenging those beliefs and thoughts around procrastination. So we all have cognitive distortions, and I suppose put simply, all a cognitive distortion is when you look at the world in a slightly unrealistic way. So we do lots of things like magnification is a cognitive distortion, and all that is when we overemphasize the importance of things. We also minimize. That's when we like minimize the importance of things. So in magnification, a good example of it might be, you know, I text that person, they haven't texted me back, oh my god, they hate me or they don't like me anymore. In terms of minimization, you know, a good example is me getting out of bed in the morning and 10 more minutes doesn't really matter. When it does actually, because it's, you know, it's really upsetting the rest of my day. Labeling is another thing we do. You know, we label ourselves as I was saying earlier, as slow, lazy, or stupid. Again, it doesn't help with our procrastination. And we also have a tendency to jump to conclusions. So, for example, you know, we don't look at all the evidence for or against a particular thing, and we just go with what we first think. And we also have a tendency to do all or nothing thinking. So we see things in black and white. So if you think back to our like various types of procrastinators, you can probably see that there's certain cognitive distortions going on. So with the perfectionist having the thought, you know, I don't have to do the task, or if I don't do the task extremely well, then I'm a failure. You could say they're labeling themselves as a failure, and they're magnifying the extent of the problem. With the worrier, they're jumping to conclusions. You know, if I try, then I won't be able to do it. With the overdoer, if I don't accomplish all of them, then I'm not good enough. Again, they're jumping to conclusions and labeling themselves. So you see how these work. We all have cognitive distortions that are sometimes our view or perception of the world isn't 100% in touch with reality. So I'm not going to go through the rest of them because it's getting a bit long with that. So in terms of how we challenge these procrastinating thoughts, once we kind of put our finger on them, there's a very simple method called Socratic questioning. And all Socratic questioning is, it's a series of questions. If you Google it, you'll find a full list, but it's 8 or 10 questions that help you question how realistic and how helpful any particular thought is. So for example, one of the Socratic questions is, you know, what's the evidence for this thought? What's the evidence against it? And you weigh up the pros and cons. Another one I think is very good is when you ask, so if a best friend was in the same situation, what advice do you think they'd give you? You know, so you're basically removing yourself from the situation and getting a bit more logical, trying to remove some of the emotion from it. But, to simplify things, you can break the whole list of Socratic questions down into 2 simple questions that you can apply to any thought. And the first question is this thought realistic? And if the thought isn't realistic, what might be a more realistic one? The second question is the thought helpful? And if the thought isn't helpful, well, what might be a more helpful thought? So I'll run you through my smoking example and show you how I kind of use this to stop me procrastinating, and it might make a bit more sense. So, what you want to do in terms of this method is, as we said before, you want to identify that automatic negative thought. What's going through your head at that moment of procrastination. Then identify your underlying beliefs, as we said. Then ask the question, is it realistic and is it helpful? So, in my smoking example, my automatic thought was, I will want a cigarette when I'm stressed. Simple enough. One of my underlying beliefs was, if I'm in a stressful situation, then I can't cope without a cigarette. So when I asked myself the question, is that a realistic thought? I had to say, no, well, there was evidence against it. So for example, I'd sat 3-4 hour exams without having to have a cigarette. I'd done my driving test without having to have a cigarette. I'd previous quits where I'd been off for 3 or 4 months. So obviously there must have been stressful situations during that. So, you know, when I ask myself is, if I'm in a stressful situation, then I can't cope without a cigarette, 100% realistic, I had to say no. And so then I asked, what might be a more realistic thought? And I came up with, I can handle stressful situations without a cigarette when I have to. The second question I asked is, if I'm in a stressful situation, then I can't cope without a cigarette, is that a helpful thought? I had to say no, obviously enough, it would keep me smoking. What might have been a more helpful thought? Well, it'll get easier with time, and to be honest, cigarettes were causing my stress. It was me being in nicotine withdrawal that was causing me to be edgy and stressed most of the time. So I hope that makes sense. It's kind of a very quick run through Socratic questioning and the cognitive behavioral model. I'm going to skip through that. It's just another example of the same thing, but I think it's clear enough. So the third strategy, and we're getting a little bit more practical here, is about setting a proper goal. So I suppose I find this when clients come into me a lot. They'll come into me and say, what do you want out of this? And they're basically, well, I want to stop procrastinating. And I suppose the first thing I then try and do is set an appropriate goal for them. So in terms of goals, there's three different types, basically. There's end goals, where it is you want to end up. So, for example, you might say, I want to lose 10 kilos. You've got milestones, which are just kind of important, usually arbitrary, but important points along the way. So you might say, if you're losing 10 kilos in weight, that, I'll lose 2 kilos, then 4 kilos, then 6 kilos, then 8 kilos. And the third type of goal you have are behavioral goals. And behavioral goals are the actions or activities that you take to reach your milestones and reach your end goal. Simple enough? So in terms of setting an appropriate goal around procrastination, you want that goal to be SMART and positively phrased. And SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the SMART acronym. Why it's important, you want your goal to be specific and not vague, so that you know what you're aiming for. You want it to be measurable, so that you know that the tactics and the strategies and the behaviors that you're doing are working, that you're working in the right direction. Because if you can't measure how you're getting along, then how do you know the behavior you're doing to get there is the right one? To be achievable is pretty self-explanatory. You want your goals to be realistic. You want your goals to be relevant. I suppose I spoke a little bit about that earlier. Are they in tune with who you are as a person? And you want them to be time-bound. I.e., you don't want it to be just open-ended, because if they are, then you don't have any of that time pressure this lady was talking about earlier in terms of getting stuff finished. You also want goals to be positively phrased. And what that means is you don't want dead man's goals. And all a dead man's goal is it's a goal that someone who's dead can do. So I'll give you an example and it might make this a bit clearer. So if you think of the goal of stop procrastinating about working on my thesis, this is a goal that a dead man can do. So the issue with this is you're never really going to stop procrastinating in your life. I mean, it's something that we all do naturally. And sometimes maybe for very good reasons. As Mel Robbins was saying earlier, maybe you're stressed. Maybe a little break can be a good thing. So what I would do is I'd turn this around and get people to phrase it a little bit like this. So to do 6 hours of focused work on my thesis daily until September 31st. So that's very specific, it's very measurable, are you doing 5 hours or are you doing 7 hours every day? Realistic, I don't know if I ever really got 6 hours done, but in terms of being relevant, obviously it was important to me and it was time bound. But the fact that it's positively phrased rather than negatively phrased, it gives me something to aim for rather than to try and stop doing something. So like, again, if I was to say, setting the goal, stop procrastinating about getting out of bed in the morning, a more appropriate goal might be to get out of bed at 8 a.m. every morning and follow my morning routine. So again, it's much more specific and gives you something to aim for, rather than I'm just going to try and stop doing this thing. Because you don't get any reward for not doing something. Make sense? Okay. So the final two strategies...
Just to add to that,
Yeah.
the easiest way to think about that is that all goals should be positive. So instead of saying stop smoking, you make it be healthy. Okay? Or if there's a habit, you can't actually kill habits. You can change that. So instead of you smoking, you suck a lollipop. Okay? Because that's an easy behavior to transition. So you replace that behavior. So whenever you're doing that, the dead man's goal equivalent is state it in the positive. Otherwise, what happens is it triggers the procrastination and all the fears that go with it. Does that make sense? Yes?
Thanks very much. You explain things so much better than me sometimes. So strategy 4, and we're kind of into the very practical end of things, and this is breaking it down. So when you think of many of the tasks that we procrastinate on, they can often be very, very big, and as a result of their size, they can be very, very vague. And the thing with something big and vague and unknown, like the unknown in human nature just elicits anxiety, a slight anxiety. I mean, think of a fear of the dark. Why are you afraid of the dark? It's because, not because it's dark, but because you don't know what's there. It's unknown. So this can make us feel anxious, and sometimes the size of things can make us feel a little bit bored because they're a little bit overwhelming. So, simply enough, what I get clients to do is break it down. So take a big goal, break it down into smaller goals. Then you get that smaller goal and you break it down again. And you keep breaking it down until you start to remove that anxiety. I suppose Mel had mentioned in her video about, I just want you to do 5 minutes. And like in very extreme cases, I will tell people, tomorrow I just want you to do 5 minutes on whatever task it is. So the Pomodoro method, what I normally tell people to do is break your task down, your big overwhelming task, down into 25 minutes. So all the Pomodoro method is this, and this is what got me through my master's thesis and got it published actually. And I had messed it up so badly so many times and I spent so much work on it. But all I did was this, break it down into 25-minute tasks. So commit to fully focus for those 25 minutes. But sometimes people, 25 minutes can seem too overwhelming. So, commit for 15. Or generally what I do, like this moment with it is I'll commit for 40 minutes. But you want to break it down to around 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break. Do whatever you want for the 5-minute break. Like handstands, whatever makes you happy. Then after the 5-minute break, you do another 25 minutes. And you repeat this 6 times. And what this does is it breaks it down into small enough, manageable chunks. I mean, anyone can face doing 25 minutes of whatever it is. But when it's a big vague task, like get your master's thesis done, it can just, it can give you the shivers and feel horrible. But doing 25 minutes is something short. So repeat this by 6 times and have lunch. Take an hour off. And you just need to do that twice a day, and you've got 6 hours of being super productive in any one day. And like I said, I know this works. It got me my master's thesis finished, got it first, and it got it published, and it was just purely using this method. The thing is, you can vary, as I was saying, you can vary to 25 minutes, and you can vary the amount of the break. Obviously, you don't want to give yourself too long a break or you'll lose momentum. But, like I said, I do about 40 minutes and a 10-minute break now, and I'll do 4 of them and then take an hour. But because they're little short bursts, you're super productive, and if you're fully committed, your energy is in a very good place with it. The other thing is that 5-minute break can be very useful for doing other things. So what I used to do when I was doing my thesis was I do 25 minutes and then I do 5 minutes of housework. And the funny thing is, because by the time you finish your 25 minutes you can't wait to get away from the thesis, the 5 minutes housework can actually seem enjoyable. So at the end of your day, I had a much cleaner gaff and I'd also got 6 hours work done. So in terms of an example of this, I'm using that kind of end goal, milestone, behavioural goal. I'll just run through briefly my thesis, and I've talked about it a bit, so I'll do this very quickly. So the end goal was to get a finished thesis. The milestones were, there was various ones, but like major steps were kind of finish the design and gather all the data. I had to write the thing up, and then I had to rewrite the thing because I messed it up a few times. And in terms of behavioural goals, each section had ones that I could break down. So in the design of it, was to read articles, create videos, create the website. writing it up, doing statistical analysis and reading it, more bloody reading. But the point is I could break all this down into 25-minute tasks. So whatever it was, I could read an article for 25 minutes, and that's all I had to focus on, rather than looking at my whole day of, 6 hours of working on the thesis. It's actually all I focus on now is 25 minutes, and it works. So the last one I'm going to bring you to is a little bit experimental on my behalf. There's a lot of science that we know in terms of forming habits, and he knows quite a lot about this, but that issue of getting out of bed in the morning is something, despite all my cognitive behavioural knowledge, is something I was yet to crack until recently. So this strategy is about forming habits using repetition, and this is inspired by the US Navy. So in terms of how the US Navy get recruits out of bed, is on the first day of boot camp at some ungodly hour, let's say 4 in the morning, sirens go off, drill sergeants come in, start screaming at them. You've all seen the war movies where they're like screaming at them, so they're all standing up, and their goal is, within 30 seconds of that siren going off, that every soldier standing at the end of their bed at attention with their bed met. Yeah? So what they do in the first morning, all the sirens off, drill sergeant comes in, screams at them, it's all very aggressive until they get the bed done. It usually takes a few minutes. And then the second they're all finished, they go, okay, get back into bed. And they turn the lights off, and they do it again, and they do it again, and the first day they do it up to 10 times, and they repeat that 3 or 4 times in a row, until when that siren goes off, they don't think anymore, and they're up and standing at attention at the end of that bed without it even being conscious. So, what I did is, didn't have a siren or an alarm, but what I've done all last week, because I was doing research about this is one thing that's been bugging me, is 3 afternoons last week, I pulled my curtains, I got into bed, I set my alarm, I let it go off, and I got out of bed. And I repeated that 10 times. Today and yesterday, I didn't hit snooze once. So, I don't know, it's still an experimental, still need to do a little bit more work on it, but I suppose, and this is the point with different strategies for different tasks, I suppose this was the only one that worked for me, and sometimes a behavioural model can. So, overall, I kind of ran through what procrastination is, simply doing other tasks when we should be doing the task that we should be doing. In terms of why we do it, we think certain ways, this causes us to feel certain ways, which causes us to behave certain ways. And in terms of strategies to overcome it, I ran through is getting at those real reasons, or identifying your procrastinating thoughts, challenging those procrastinating thoughts using the Socratic questioning method. Setting proper goals, rather than saying you're going to stop procrastinate, what is it you really want to do? Breaking it down and using the Pomodoro method, break it into small chunks that aren't so overwhelming. And finally, automating the task. So that's it, pretty much finished. And you could be too, if you ever start. I'd like to say thank you all very, very much. That's my first one that I was doing it, so any feedback, etc. would be much appreciated. I thank Manoj for having me. Thanks to my website, jasonwarren.com. Feel free to do it. If anyone wants to contact me, they'll get me at jasonwarren@gmail.com. I've got cards there. I basically help people do the things that they should do, those important things. I help them get them done. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed.
Did you guys enjoy it? Yes. Why don't we give Jason a really good applause? Come on, guys. So, guys, we have 2 choices, all right? I want to make this more interactive. I hope you enjoy the interactivity. It stops you from falling asleep, right? So, we can either take 5-minute comfort break and come back, right? And the only catch is that you have to promise to come back. It's not an exit term, right? If you break it, you're going to miss something even more important than this. So would you like a 5-minute break, stretch your legs, grab some water, or would you like to carry on?
Break.
Oh, so we'll see you back in go and get this thing, go to the toilet, we'll see you in 5. We'll drag you back here, all right? Okay, the door's locked, so you can't get out.
Okay, yeah.
Well done, fair play to you.
Thanks, man. Cheers.
Pomodoro method because you're thinking of the pickle of Pomodoro, this size, easy to manage, is it? What made you think about what came up with that?
That's what it's called. It's a. Yeah, it's just a method I came across. And when I was doing my master's thesis, because it was very, so it's all self-driven,
Yes.
experiments, website and all that stuff first. So it was a lot of work.
You're leaving.
So I was doing it, and I was like looking at the sides of it, but I was like, this might work. So I tried it.
That's what it was called.
We have if you just
I
scan
couldn't find out why it was called
get
Pomodoro.
onto the
Yeah, well, you know,
WhatsApp
Pomodoro
group.
was the Italian for tomato,
for the-
but it's for, it could be the size of a fucking,
Okay, yeah,
the size of a marble.
I have no idea why it's
You see,
called Pomodoro.
European film from like in America or in England, they probably consider the small pickle of Pomodoro. They call down the small ones.
It's going to be a guy called Pomodoro, and he might have been an expert on that.
No, well, yeah, Pomodoro is your Italian for tomato.
Find out why.
And initially I thought of that method would suit me so well because I'm a place in Italy in the south and there's loads of trees and everything. But anyway, there's grass to cut about the size of Croke Park. Okay, and you know I keep going over every month to do a bit, and it's like that. So do you know what? Actually, if I just did 20 minutes and have a break.
This is the beauty of it is, I think, like, I mean, if it's something that's really, really, really putting you off, say you do 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But you find once you get the momentum going.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you're cutting it, but like.
Oh yeah, well I'm cutting it at the moment. This is the worst as well. This is where the anxiety part happens. I have a strimmer and I've had it a couple of years. I break it every year somehow. And my neighbour Antonio brings me to the mechanic and I pay him about 30 or less to get the thing fixed and I'm back out for a day or so. I really break it. So I'm going to get a side. Well, it's called Puglia, is the region, but you know. No way.
Okay, so I was just there.
Yeah, I go every month. Yeah, I was in there in January, the end of January, the 20th. I've been going to Puglia. Well, the town I'm nearest to is called Stroke. Yeah, but like say, if you're in Puglia, are you north of Barry or south of Barry?
I think Rubo said Barry.
Oh yeah, okay, so that would be the region. See,
Rubo
the,
and.
what did you few times Alvaro Bello, Lucaro Tondo,
Alvaro
Martina
Bello, I've
Franca?
been in, beautiful.
Yeah. Alvaro Bello, and then Cisterlino, Lucaro Tondo. I'm just wondering because
Alvaro Bello, I remember.
well, everybody knows that. But Puglia is as long as Ireland. Like if you take it from Donegal to Kerry, Puglia is that
I
long.
just found Barry.
Yeah, no, I swear to God, I mean, Puglia itself even goes north of Barn, right? And then a lot south. But I go over every month for at least 4 days, because the flights are cheap as chips. And I don't even get a taxi home now, because my taxi from the airport home costs more than my flight. So what I do is, I'm lucky, I live in Glasgow, I get the buses, I do that. But anyway, cutting all that story out, it was just, that was something that I learned a lot about. I came back and only back this morning, really, you know, or late last night, or whatever. Anyway, it was like an awful lot of what I didn't understand why I think that way about things. Like I've just broken my strimmer, and it broke into the afternoon, a sunny afternoon yesterday. And I knew I couldn't get hold of anyone, or the mechanic wouldn't be open before then I had to fly, and I knew an afternoon was gone. And I started thinking, plus, I'm fucked if I'm ever doing that again. Yeah, and I'm gonna buy myself eventually just a side that can't break down. You know the old fashioned. You know.
Well, that's why I'm sorry when I was talking about it. I was some people over there, it's literally good. But yeah, 25, like break it down into like.
That's what it will.
You know what? I'm gonna do 15 minutes. I'll give myself.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pass through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be the end of the day.
What do you do, man?
Oh yeah, I'm a software engineer in, I don't know if you know the company SAP, if you heard of them. Okay, I mean, it's a very worldwide, widespread thing, but it's very hard. Yeah, I build bespoke software for CIE, the Irish Transport Company. You know, the rail buses and all that. You see, it's so expensive and specific that they have to train one of their own, which was me. And there's only one of them, so it keeps me busy, right? But like I was probably saying at the start there to others, like twice a week I go to a thing called music makers, where about 12 musicians and their guitars run around. You take your turn, and I have to perform.
What do you play?
I play guitar and I do covers, but like when in my earlier life, I actually had my own band doing my original material on YouTube. I sold 3 songs to a Hollywood film and all, you know, stupid stuff, but never big enough to really live up. But anyway, so 2 nights a week I do that, and then on the Monday I go to the Black Rock Writers Group to keep my creative writing, because I wrote a book 100 years ago and published it, but I'm always trying to keep up with that. And then I do things like on Sunday I join these cartoons, animators and sketchers and work with them in a cafe for an hour. So what I'm doing is all the time making some part of my non-day, I'm a food Thursday, so it's my non-sort of thing day. I'm forcing these other creative things that I enjoy doing anyway, and really take them to their limits. And if I push myself to go to the thing, because if I said I'm going to go home and practice my songs, I said, well, I haven't got a gig coming up, so that's another new procrastination. I don't have an event to work towards. So what's the point? Whereas if you say, well, I've got to go and do at least 3 or 4 new songs tonight for these guys, then I'm working on them and I'm doing writing and memorising.
I find when I got to do really boring tasks, I'm not going to a lot, but I use Audible. So like, I'll teach you like when I'm cleaning a house, doing dishes, so I get to learn something and I can kind of work.
I have about like 16 hours worth of Italian conversations, no English interrupted. It was all originally on CDs from libraries, and I packed this onto MP3s, and I just continuously, when there's nobody else around, I'm doing monotonous things, Italian goes on. So I'm learning Italian as I'm working.
That's perfect, you know.
But that thing I was saying to you was the one thing that I was going to say that sort of was another way, that thing about the dinner and I have an hour to do it, or I squeeze it in half an hour. But the thing about having to play at the gig every Tuesday and Wednesday in different places, that makes you work. Because if I was saying, I like my music, and one day I'll be able to play all these songs with my friends. It could take me years, I never end up.
It wasn't until you booked me, and okay, you're all suddenly it's like, okay, I'll take it.
And everything you do, I think, in public speaking, because I'm a shop steward union rep in my company, and often I have to talk. They used to listen to me, but they're all used to me by now, so it doesn't bother me. Huh? Yeah, but the thing about it is, everything else helps the ability to do that. Because I played in a band, when I was the front man, and our next song is this, and I hope you like it, and then you give it, you're jumping around, that when you actually then went to just speak your music, so long as you remembered your words, you didn't care, you know? And then those sort of things, or I don't know, some people are good as sort of vocal coaches, but I never went to speaking vocal coach. But so that I'd avoid problems when we're talking about this thing, the content school music, it's this ancient Russian style. And I went for a while, I learned all the techniques. And he says, oh Conor, I can clear out that for you. The reason you're not making enough volume when you want to is your resonators are full. These exercises, and now today when you go home, you'll feel crackles of things coming down your throat. That's the stuff coming up. Yeah, but then the next thing was I could stand in front of a room without a microphone in a big church or thing, and be actually be able to go to here, but actually be able to do. But here we are, can you all hear me?
There's a lot to be said for it, like, you've been practicing the last couple of days,
Yeah.
I'm very sorry, I really have to use the restroom.
Yeah, no, I'll keep you all day, but no, and the volume, oh, yeah, so keep that right. I think the volume for public speaking without microphone is in the head. In other words, those areas of your head, that's like your amplifier. You think it's here, you think it's pushing it, but by actually just letting it go.
Very interesting.
Sorry, I keep you all. Someday you have a point, you never know. Intrigued as well, coincidence there. The girlfriend.
Yeah, that's gas. Small thing.
Do you have a QR code tonight? Where's the?
Okay, I see one here.
Just scan that. If you've got iOS 11, it will automatically scan it. Can you see the link there now? Just follow the link. You don't need to take the photos. The link is there on the top. Fine.
Second on May, Thursday?
So just join.
Yeah, I got my ticket already. Yeah. Actually, I'll go back.
Doctor, like the doctor, what? I'd say it was.
Really, it's really difficult to know how you're doing when you're up there, like what it sounds like. So I'd be very interested in video because it give me a bit of reality.
Oh, definitely. And give you kind of critique of yourself once you get back. Yes.
I like the color combination.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I was going to try to differentiate because people hear when I'm a psychologist and they immediately think therapist. So I kind of to try and differentiate and kind of think a bit darker a little bit.
Yeah, but the psychologist is not a psychiatrist, so...
No, exactly, yes. But I suppose a lot of when people hear psychologist, they often say therapist.
Everybody?
Well, I'm a coach and NLP master, so like a lot of it already like I was like putting like the proper terminology into how this.
Well, yeah, I mean it's to try and get it out in such a way that it's easy to explain to people in a short period of time without being too technical. Huh?
How long is it been doing it?
All right.
Year and a half.
Okay.
Right, everybody. How's everybody feeling? How's everybody feeling? Huh? Fantastic. So, like I said, if you guys want to know more about this, I'm quite happy. Just as a show of hands, would you like a longer workshop and actually work through and take you through a lot more techniques? But that would have to be chargeable because it'll have to be a better venue, etc. So just to kind of get a sense of it, how many people would come to a paid workshop? All right, okay. So what I'll do is, now the next thing is we have set up a WhatsApp group for the coaching meetup for those who aren't familiar. So it'll allow you to carry on your interactions and it'll also connect with the accountability circles. So there's 3 ways you can do it. If you have a newish iPhone or a QR code scanner on a Samsung or whatever, if you can just scan this and it'll give you the link to the WhatsApp group and you can just join the group. Or otherwise, if you prefer, you can take my business card. If you can pass these around, then feel free to do that. Okay? So, anybody know what accountability circles are?
I could guess.
No, don't guess. All right. So, it's a term I created. Okay. The most powerful thing is to use the power of people. So I'm going to illustrate a couple of examples for you to achieve your goals or overcome a problem. So, how many people here have a manager that manages their goals and tasks? Hands up. You're all self-employed. Okay. So, when I first went to work for Price Waterhouse, they had a very interesting way to make sure you did your timesheets on time. Okay? And you know what they used to do? There was no manager coming to chase you up. What would happen is, your deadline was on the day of the month. So you had to have your timesheet and your expenses done and completed. If there was an error or if it was late, you know what they did? They stuck the offending person's name on the coffee or water coolers. And nobody wanted the public to see they hadn't done their job. Does that work for you? Does social pressure work for you? Yes? No? Okay. In a lot of situations, social pressure drives you. Believe it or not, the social pressure, it also makes you lie, by the way. Because sometimes you don't want your face let down or whatever. So, yes, I did the job, or, right? If you think about it, the government is totally motivated by what people think. Okay? How many times do you get motivated by what your spouse thinks of you or your partner thinks of you?
It depends what your interest is right there at that moment. If there's
Yeah.
something you really want.
Okay, so when I started running my own projects, one of the things I also did was I created a system, and that's why you see we talk about coaching buddies. So sometimes we get other people like a coach or a person. How many of you use a personal trainer? Anybody use the personal trainer?
For yoga.
All right, okay. So what do they tend to do? Anybody, they will create measures. What did you eat or how much did you exercise? They'll ask you to keep a journal. And when they come and meet you, the first thing they do is they go through your objectives. So the other thing that I do as part of that accountability, when I have a project, and let's say there's 20, 40 people working, I would assign everybody a buddy. And the way it would work would be that, let's take you were leading on one project. You would be their buddy. So the purpose of the buddy was threefold. Number one, if they had a problem, they didn't have to go up to the manager, me, and come back, or to review a document. How many of you, when you write something or code or whatever, so rather than it going up through a separate thing, the buddy becomes your support. Anybody else use a buddy? Do you have any buddies? Do you go running? Or exercise? Do you do it alone or whatever? Right. Okay. But if you know that somebody, sometimes the trainer just works by turning up in the morning because we react instinctively. Our brains are wired for people. And I'm not just talking about your mirror neurons, I'm talking about your serotonin. So the entire concept of accountability circles, and one of the ones that I'm toying with, is to help build community. So there's 2 or 3 ones. One is, you've sometimes seen social pressure. If somebody hasn't done something, everybody in the group is penalized. Have you ever seen that? Where does that work?
Military.
Huh?
Military.
Military school, where else? So if you're going on the boot camp and one person doesn't do it, the whole team has to be punished, right? So the whole concept of accountability circles is to wire other people and build support systems in whichever way that you want to. So it could be a group, it could be a circle. Have any of you come across the systems online? I've forgotten the name of the website because I'm trying to avoid PowerPoints and video, where you set a public goal and that person will, for example, if it's a wake-up goal, they'll ring you. So you may be tempted to turn this, but if that person rings you to get up at that time, right? Another example that they do is for porn addiction. Have you come across that one? There's a website, and what happens is, if you go to your PC and it's set up and you go to that website or Facebook or whatever, everybody in the group gets to know that you went to a porn website. Huh? Do you see the power of people? Yes? Is it making sense?
To do with shame, in a way.
Yeah, so you can either work for pride or for shame, which is the other side. And we are far more inclined to do things when somebody asks us. One of the most famous examples was, they did the study about how a woman was raped. Please, if this offends you, I apologize. She was standing in a queue and she got physically raped in front of all these people. And you know what the mistake was? She was shouting, help, help. She didn't ask one person by name. If she just pointed and said, hey John, even if the name was wrong, now the pressure is there for them to do something. right? So there's many different ways, whether you use a buddy system, a circle system, to create social pressure. When I went on a diet and I lost about 70 pounds, I made my goal very public. So anytime somebody saw me, you know, so if you look at entrepreneurs, what do you call it, Alcoholics Anonymous. How does Alcoholics Anonymous work? Does it have a buddy system? Yes?
And they have the sponsors and all.
Right. So it creates social pressure and a support system. How many of you people use any form of other person support to help you get things done? Only one. Come on, be honest. But have you thought of systemizing it?
I have like this buddy group. I went to another goal setting meetup and they kind of encouraged us to buddy up with other people. And we kind of, like my goal is fitness. Like I try to go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. It's not just to lose weight, just to keep fit. And the other girls, they have like goals like, yeah, take a walk every day during lunch break. And we try to just kind of like check every time when we take a picture and then send it to the group so that we know that we have accomplished the goal for that day or that week. It didn't quite take off, but I think for me it worked well.
But you see, the downside is, what everybody hates is being accountable. Because they don't want the pressure. They don't want the humiliation. But the easiest way to kick off something is to find a buddy. So, you know, the whole concept behind when we set up the group was that find somebody to help you. How many people use peer-to-peer learning? Only one? Is it easier for you to learn together something like coding or exercise? So the point is you learn easier with a peer than you do with somebody high up. Right? Otherwise classrooms would fail. Position, ranking. How many people in their game system use leaderboards? Sales companies are entirely driven by leaderboards. You don't want your name on the last. And anybody ever work in sales? Okay. So how many people take part in bulletin boards or whatever? Social proof is the name of the game. So what is the best example of social proof? Which business is based on that? Which two businesses are fundamentally based on that? Speak up. Facebook, yes. What would happen to you if you wrote somebody and there was no views, no likes, no comments? Right? And it also works in a destructive way. Sometimes children will, to get the attention of parents, do bad things. Yes? Any of you parents here? Okay, obviously not. So, I mean, if you want to find out more about how to organize your team, how to organize your system, without getting overloaded with trying to manage people, right? In BT, our finance director had a lovely system, and he would actually get the peer to check on, and he used to call it checks and balances. And in fact, good team structures create checks and balances. Yes? No? If you look at something, do you think that the hospital fiasco has checks and balances in it? Right? What have they been designed to do? Am I making sense? Right? Huh? No? So, there are a couple of choices here, right? What I wanted today, because I'm conscious everybody has time to go and so on, so the idea wasn't to give you a long thing. I think if you start to reflect on it, learning to use the power of your friends, your buddies, creating a self-help group, these are all examples of buddy systems, right? But it's very difficult to organize, which is why some of these online businesses set up, like I said, with Paul. Another example is that you actually lose money. So, but public shaming of you not meeting your goal is a very powerful way to build. And so there are two ways. One is that even if you don't have a boss, you can ask somebody to be your boss to help you with your goal. Does that make sense? Do you see what I mean? Now, there are certain prerequisites. You need to care that that person's self, right? If it, I couldn't give a fuck, then what's gonna happen, right? Like, there's a lot more thought in it, but I wanted to get, because it's a lot to take in. Because we tend to think of ourselves as being autonomous, but we're not. Our brains are wired for people, right? Like, what matters to me? Would I or Jason give this talk if it was empty? Huh? Why do pop stars in football really care if there's an audience if they could just enjoy kicking the ball with each other? Does an audience improve your performance? Right? Does the fact that if you have to present your project to a team drive you to make better goals? Sorry?
It was the Kruger-Dunning effect.
Yes. Well, no, the Kruger-Dunning is a different thing. The Kruger-Dunning is about people not knowing that they don't know. Okay?
Yeah, but then it's still like when you have an observer, it's also
No,
like,
that's a different thing. That's the green spoon effect. All right? So, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
So, all of these things, do you know what the green spoon effect is? Okay. This is the most powerful thing that you can do. All right? Just supposing you are sitting there with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and they have cooked a meal, and you just go, delicious, isn't it? What is the impact of that? Now, the green spoon effect was done by the General Electric or one of them when they were looking at the feedback mechanism of what got better performance. Right? Groups, teams, competitions are all forms of social pressure. And when I design systems or build groups or deliver companies, that's what I do as part of building a team. Does this sound common sense or is this rubbish? Who agrees that social pressure matters?
Yeah.
Right?
Sorry, can you just explain the green spoon effect? What is that? Just basically by giving positive feedback, is it?
Yes. And the opposite also works. Right? So, but the opposite is a very funny thing about vicarious reinforcement. So it's, if a child is behaving badly, what should you do? Yeah. Right? It's not about you giving out to them because that gives them the attention they want. Right? It's colloquially known as the squeaking door gets the oil. Right? And how many people also get bonus that way, do you know? How many people create the problem and then they are rewarded for solving the problem? Have you ever seen that? The entire government works that way. Huh? Huh? Yes, sir.
This is just back to the thing. I feel like I'm kind of like the ugly duckling in terms of like, you know, the way you say like public pressure or social pressure, you know, puts you in a better place to perform. I find like when I tell people my goals, but then I feel really stressed and then I start procrastinating. Whereas when I keep them to myself, I go,
Well, that also works for certain growth. But it depends, right? One of the things that kills, you know what is the biggest thing that kills entrepreneurship in this country? Okay. If you've ever met any entrepreneurs, and I've coached hundreds of them, right? One of the things that would happen is that if they declare their goal publicly, they're afraid a year down the road, their buddies in the pub will say, oh, how's that project going? Right? And they are afraid to say, and very often when people lie, whether it's Gleason, so building the right kind of accountability circles where either you are evasive about your goal or you are, overstressed by it. So the issue is what is the goal you want to do? And again, it goes back to a smaller thing. And sometimes learning to ask for help in helping people monitor you on a regular basis. So if you're on a diet, and you ask somebody to just check up and ask you how you're doing. Does that work?
Yeah.
So maybe the problem was it was too big a thing, right? So what you have to avoid is the point of what we call red stress. Red stress is a feared thing. Green stress is that gets you to perform, right? So think about this. Do you think that you would be breaking records in Olympics if you were performing to a time machine? Why do we bother having the Olympics? Please tell me. Right? Huh? Otherwise, why don't people just go run on a thing and then say, oh, I did it in 4 minutes? Is this making sense? You're thinking about it.
Sorry, can I just be
Yes.
really direct and ask you that you kind of you've asking us a lot of like questions to kind of reflect on it, and like what's your suggested solution then?
No, so what I'm saying is there are different goals that you
Yeah.
can create.
Yeah.
There are different systems. So, for example, if you wanted me to create an accountability group, where, for example, what's the best example of in slimming an accountability group? Slimming World. So what I'm quite happy to do here is to create a group, but for it to be worth my time, you will have to pay. And what we can do is meet every week, and you can either buddy up or in the group set your goals, and the group will come and check up on you. Do you follow what I'm saying? So
So
there will
we
be.
need to set up a group through you instead
No,
of
you can do it yourself. I don't care.
yeah.
Right? It depends. You see, the purpose of a group is to get you organized enough for it to work. You know,
How is it gonna be organized? Like, how do you find organized people versus not organized people?
but that's up to me to decide once I see if there's traction. You understand? Because there are certain commitment issues for an accountability group to work. One is everybody has to turn up. Okay? What is the biggest way, and I'll give you an example, of you shifting LinkedIn? Do you know how that works? Okay, you may have come across some companies that will offer to up your LinkedIn profile. And what they do is they agree as a group that they will look and everybody else likes it. So instead of it being fake people, it's real people liking your group. But the thing is, everybody in the group has to agree to do it for each other. Otherwise it doesn't work. 'Cause the thing with promises is that when people break a promise, society is built on a sequence of promises, right? And sometimes we have external bodies to check that those promises have been kept, right? And other times we don't have those systems, and then everybody starts to play, what's the word, freeloader. You check on me, but I'm not checking on you, right? So one of the things that I'm planning this discussion is, if you guys are interested in creating a group, but we need at least 10, 20, 30 people that are going to do it, because that's what Slimming World does. Any of you go to any of those swimming clubs? What's the process in it? The process that makes it successful is that everybody turns up every Saturday, has a weigh-in, and then they also talk about their issues and stress. So that's about you creating support groups. Does this make sense? Right? So you can create those groups by yourself. I'm not, but if there's enough interest here, then I'm quite happy to create a group that will help you work through particular goals like weight or fitness or whatever. And within that group, we will create. So when we started this group, the whole idea was that people would find each other and do it. Okay, so this is why I've been encouraging you all to talk to yourselves, right? So you can by yourselves go off and pair up and find people that you want to keep an eye on you, or if you think it would help to have a more structured thing where you meet regularly and so on, and it becomes a commitment, then that'll keep you on the straight and narrow. That's what works with Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what works with Diet Clubs, that's what works with the US Army. I could go on forever. But to structure that takes time and effort. So would you like to be part of a group, or would you like to just do it yourself? All right, so can I ask a favor of you? All of you have my phone number? So just text me on WhatsApp, and then what I'll do is I'll try to see and set up something a bit bigger. This is not like a sales pitch kind of stuff, but the point is to organize a group that's going to be committed to each other, and if there's a critical mass of people, right, but the kind of commitments that require are you set up your goals, you set up your smaller sub-goals, you come to the event regularly, right? There is a cost to it because if it's for free, what will happen? Nobody turns up, right? So we're talking £5-10 a week, and it just makes sure that you do it, right? But the point is, it's also easier if you turn up in person, because when you have to look at a person and tell them they haven't done it, it's a lot easier than ghosting somebody or ignoring the phone call, right? And if we need to build a leader or reward system, but there's no point me hypothetically organizing. Does this sound like a good idea?
Yeah.
Put your hands up. No one put your hand up.
I'm in a coaching group
All right.
and I'm in another entrepreneurial
All
group,
right.
so I kind of think I'm committed to it.
All right.
But I
Okay,
think
good.
it's a really good idea, and those groups have worked well for me.
Okay. So whether your goal could be entrepreneurial. So when you text, tell me what you're trying to do. Is it start a business? Is it give up smoking? Is it getting fit? Right? And then I'll get some feedback from you guys. I mean, what are the kind of common problems you got? Give me some examples.
My own
Hmm?
problems.
Whatever.
Now we're interested.
See, the most powerful thing that I'm trying to get to is to utilize the power of people. How many of you go to Toastmasters? Anybody go to Toastmasters? What do you think? Is that a peer support group? Right? But they structure it so that there's a process to follow. Right? All good self-help groups do, it's not self-help. And do you know what is the benefit of helping somebody else? You know what happens to your brain when you help somebody? What happens to your brain when you help somebody? How do you feel to help somebody? But what happens when the other person does not reciprocate or does not acknowledge their help?
Sometimes you should give from the place of just want to give.
No, conceptually we understand, but if you have a sustained period of giving,
Yeah.
right? Like, one of the things that tends to happen in societies, we stop caring because we say, oh, it's the state's job to give social welfare. But am I making sense? Or it's somebody else's problem? But if you're trying to build a positive society, so this is about helping each other, creating goodwill, and it's good to be good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you just have to feel though appreciated.
Appreciated,
It doesn't matter.
right?
It might
So-
just be a thank you. But
Yeah,
you want
right?
to do it.
So when we build the whole system of acknowledgement and all, any of you members of BNI? Okay. Are you familiar with Business Network? It's one of the most successful networks, and one of the tricks that they do is that everybody gives referrals to each other, and they're acknowledged, right? So, but it's not like it's accounted for, you gave me this and I gave you that, but it creates, so, you know, each of the chapters, 20, 40 people are there to help everybody else succeed. And that has a very powerful effect in terms of your oxytocin. I mean, you're nodding so you understand. So, does that make sense? Alright, so if you want to take a card, please do that. I don't want to make this a long lecture because I want to get the relevant people. When you're designing your business, when you're designing your personal goals, even if you don't join the group. But the thing is, because the group is committed to the group, it makes it work. Whereas if it's an informal thing, things fall down. Right? So the point is to create an enabling framework, but not take away personal responsibility. Does that make sense? All right? So give me your thoughts on that. I know it's very hot in here. I apologize. Okay? So now I need your feedback before. How many people want a card? Has everybody got a card?
Yeah, we passed them around. I think everyone has.
All right. So very quickly, what's your feedback for today's event? Have you found some interesting ideas? Huh? So, you know, procrastination, do you understand why I merged the two events together? Right? So, the reason I like to finish early is I think most people get fatigued after an hour. Okay? So, if anyone wants to talk to me, here for a few minutes. Thank you very much.